세상의 모든 돈 되는 이야기 캐치 더 머니. 오늘은요, 이 다양한 브랜드와 협업하면서 디지털 콘텐츠와 블록체인 기술을 좀 결합하고 있는 그 선두주자인 애니모카브랜즈의 두 분 모셨습니다. 먼저 인사 나눠보도록 하겠습니다. Hi guys. Hi. Could you briefly introduce yourself to our subscribers?
Sure. My name is Yatsu. I'm chairman and co-founder of Animokabränz. We're a company that's made over 500, actually 40 investments in the space and big champions of digital property rights.
Hi, I'm Kenneth. I'm project lead of Mocha Network, and we're building the digital identity infrastructure for the open internet. Yeah.
So, Animokabränz is currently investing in like over 540 projects in the Web3 space. So, what was the most meaningful investment case for you and why?
Asking what is our most meaningful investment is like picking our favorite child. So we can't really do that. But I would say so all projects are important, but I would say there's some themes we really like, right? And so we invest against them because we think that they can help accelerate the space, right? So it's kind of like when you build an economy, some things that you build have impacts that will take more time. So for instance, when we invest in things like education, like open campus, we do not expect it to have a major impact next month or this year, but over the long term, like education, it's very fundamental, right? And then, of course, we also invest in sort of infrastructure around digital identity, like with Mochaverse, for instance, right? And for Mochaverse, the reason we did that is because there's a real problem around trust and reputation in Web3. So when we make all these investments, we want to find a way where people can transact in a safe way. Like, how do I trust people that are in an anonymous wallet? And we have to do with reputation, and nobody was doing it. So that's why we would invest in something like Mochaverse. But it was kind of a little bit like when we and we still do a lot of investment in gaming, so we think that's important too. But we like to go for industries that are blue sky. So when we went into gaming and metaverse, that was in 2017, 2018. Right? Nobody was talking about gaming. Everyone was like, what's gaming? You don't care about that, right? And then suddenly it emerged and it's become now a major category. So we like to identify categories that are uncharted because, frankly, that's where the growth opportunity comes, right? Of course, games have potential, but if you launch a new game today, the chance of it standing out is harder because you have a lot more competition, right? So of course we do AI, but a lot of people do AI, for instance, right? We also are big investors in Deepin, but a lot of people do Deepin. So I like to focus on the things that most people don't talk about, because if they don't talk about it, that's actually probably the biggest opportunity.
How do you think? Do you have anything to add?
No, I think for Mochaverse, building the digital identity infrastructure is really living and breathing Yat's vision on the open metaverse and interoperability and digital property rights, right? Because it's really, if you think about it, the most valuable digital asset is data. And when Yat was pushing digital assets across metaverses, it's basically the avatar that actually represent about yourself is your reputation. We're basically distilling that down to data and make it interoperable across different domains. So I would say like there's a super engine and supercharge the ecosystem with Animoka.
Okay, so Animokabränz support the account, identity, and reputation network system called Mochaverse. And could you explain how Mochaverse can be integrated into our everyday daily life?
Yeah, so I think one partnership example is very clear and very obvious is SK. And for the Korean audience, and obviously everyone know what SK is, but what you see right now being integrated in the OK Cashback app, which is the largest loyalty program in Korea, you would already be able to experience to onboard and to generate a wallet within it, and there's a digital identity. And in the future, all the OK Cashback credentials, data about yourself can be privacy preserved, can be tokenized, and you can verify that data anywhere within the app ecosystem and also the broader consumer ecosystem. And that's very powerful. So what we believe in, of course, there are other consumer apps, games, onboarding users, building killer apps and onboarding users. Our approach to that is we go to the source of the traffic, and where the traffic actually is the existing consumer apps with a lot of users.
So you guys have emphasizes the importance of the convergence between AI and blockchain, but then it became really important to combine AI and blockchain these days. So how do you think which industry will be first to commercialize this convergence?
Well, I mean, AI is here already, so I guess it depends on how you think about it. But with the area that we're super excited about, is around AI and NPCs as in non-player characters. So most of the sort of AI that people interact with in the world is actually a kind of gaming AI, but it's a very dumb AI. You can't really communicate with them very well. And one of the reasons why it was difficult to implement sort of much more higher level AI, like with the LLMs in games, is the cost. The cost of running the AI is just too expensive. But now, with DeepSeek and other approaches, you can see the training models getting sort of more efficient and better. So there's a setup cost that costs more, but then the operating cost reduces down. And that's actually when you see this genesis of much more very smart AI that emerges in games. So we think that's a really exciting trend. But the other thing, of course, is from the tooling side of things. Like everyone talks about vibe coding right now, right? That's an example. But it's not just going to be vibe coding. It's just going to be sort of, I guess, vibing AI everything, right? Because you're going to be able to literally just give your thoughts and it will create an output of some form of another, whether this is images, ideas, creation. And how many people today just talk to an AI to get an idea and to just canvas essentially thoughts around that, right? So whether this is a trading bot, whether this is an NPC, the ultimate interaction that's valuable for human connection is the human interaction. It's not the AI in itself. It's the fact that the human is talking to the AI and he gets an idea from talking to the AI, right? Maybe it's just a mirror. You know how when some people talk to someone and they just repeat what you just said, right? But then somehow because they repeat the same thing or they mirror your talk, somehow you get a better idea, right, through the conversation, right? So that's actually what an AI is now able to do at scale as well. So to me, it's not limited towards that, right? I think the blockchain part, though, is important because this is how AI actually becomes something that can live forever, right? And it's also something, when you think about federated models, that actually can be truly community-owned, right? So if you think about the future, how do we protect creator rights? Obviously, you can create basically a kind of watermark through blockchain, so you can reward people appropriately. But the other one is how do you make sure that AI is not controlled by a single party, right? Because right now, in one hand, we have to trust someone like Sam Altman a lot, right? That he doesn't go crazy or do something, right? And we can see some of the problems we have with that kind of centralization. So having it in a decentralized manner, which blockchain I think is the best way of doing that, actually ensures that we can keep AI not just safe, but also serving sort of humanity.
So do you think there will be come a time when AI-based NPCs in the Web3 game will own or trade digital assets?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I think that's going to be one of the biggest events around sort of trading transactions. That actually, in many ways, it's possible that things like NFT trading will increase because of AI agents, because they're basically going to do these actions and they're going to try to optimize. And remember, when people trade an item, they don't necessarily have to trade an item for profit. They might trade an item for engagement, or they might trade an item because they need it for an action, right? And so, to me, this actually creates sort of a new wave of, I guess, AI utility in virtual worlds. So when you think about people playing games right now, like a MMORPG, you're actually kind of interacting with a lot of different NPCs already that are doing certain actions, but in a pre-programmed manner. But they're doing this action for millions of people already at the same time. So now they can do this not only for millions of people at the same time, they'll also end up interacting with other agents. And we see this already. And one of the big games this year that will come out that I think will probably give us that next level interaction is GTA 6. And you can already see, for instance, things like with PUBG, right? They have essentially sort of the partner mode, where you can basically call in a player that supports you in the game, right? And they interact with you, but they also interact against others. So I would argue it's already happening now, but it's not happening as big as it is because it's early, but I think this will be one of the primary interactions we'll see in the future.
So some believe that the only way to truly own AI is to put it on the blockchain. So do you agree with this view, or if so, could you elaborate on it?
Yeah, I think it's really focusing on different things. If you look at most of the data use cases in AI is focusing on big data, large language model with a lot of data sources, large volume of data. But one thing that no one has really solved yet or focusing on right now is verified and qualified data about the user itself, but at the same time protecting the user privacy. I'm not comfortable with sharing my medical record to the cloud for OpenAI and Sam Altman to actually having full ownership of my data when I'm sending my data to basically as an AI inference to run models and execute on behalf of me. And also the agent needs to be trusting me as a user and what kind of data is verifiable about me that I can use that to communicate with the agent. Third is when the agent needs to execute on behalf of me, what kind of, let's say I want the agent to order a hotel accommodation for me. It will require my credit card information, it will require my first name, last name. What's the best way to give access to the agent to my data and able to execute autonomously. So like those are a few things that really I wouldn't say a traditional Web 2 route are able to solve without truly and fully trusting a centralized entity.
So I think a perfect example of this is what happened with 23andMe. Right? When 23andMe went basically bankrupt, there was a big question of, well, so what happens with all the genetic data? And there was this recent ruling that said whoever is the buyer may basically have access to this data. But the people who signed up with 23andMe, giving them the data, did they agree to that? I don't think so. And also, who is the buyer? Nobody knows, right? I mean, it could be a company that might be doing some kind of, I don't know, genome testing for not good things. We have no idea. But because it's an asset that actually belongs to the company, they decide what to do with it. So that's an example. But the other thing, of course, is that you want to make sure to Kenneth's point around that the AI serves you, right? So that means that this particular sort of agent, you know that you have to have full sovereign control over, right? Now, in the Web 1, Web 2 way, that means you run your own server, right? You run your own node, and you can turn it on, turn it off, and do whatever you want. The moment you send it to the cloud, whether it's Amazon or whether it's Google, actually you're giving up control, but then you don't have the scale, right? Then do you really want it on the server? So what is the way in which you can upload your AI agent that can exist forever on the cloud that isn't controlled by a single entity? Is blockchain, right? Node infrastructure, decentralization, right? There is not one party that can basically sort of take away things from you. It's kind of like when you own Bitcoin, it's your Bitcoin. So in this case, if it's your agent, and it fully only acts in yours sort of service, and which means that you can also be accountable for it. This is the other important part. I would argue that's better for companies because when an AI agent that acts on your behalf does something, who's responsible? Legally, the owner of the AI is responsible. But if you say, well, actually, I uploaded it to the service, then who's responsible? It's kind of like when there's bad content on, let's call it Instagram or Facebook. Who's responsible? Is it Facebook or is it the user? And they would say it's the user, but actually, who is the one that's censoring? Who's the one who's deciding that it is good data or bad data? It's actually the platform, right? So this is an example of if it's not mine, then I don't have freedom over it. And with blockchain and essentially decentralization, you ensure that you're accountable and it's also sovereignly yours.
So you just mentioned about kind of ownership. So I heard that the ownership in digital asset era is Animokabrand's core philosophy. So could you explain what do you mean with ownership and how does the true digital ownership differ from Web 2?
So, let's start with just the principle of ownership, without talking about digital ownership first. Because we have ownership, we have a property right over something. We can have actually freedom of the asset. So if it is really my watch, then I can sell this watch and nobody can tell me you're not allowed to sell the watch. And whoever is the buyer, he has the freedom to buy it from you and do whatever, right? That seems like a very basic thing we take for granted, but it was only especially in places like Korea or in China, it was only like a few hundred years ago where actually you couldn't do that. Right? You didn't have the freedom to sell certain things, and you didn't have the rights to do that. The basis of that is that when you have the freedom to do that, it opens up capitalism. Right? I have the ability to sell and trade. I actually get more freedoms from it. There's a way in which you create open markets. Actually, the core of decentralization comes from the fact that we have property rights over things. So in the Web 2 world, you actually don't have any property rights. Right? So when you're on Instagram, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on any sort of platform, it belongs to them. So they decide stuff over you. You don't actually have any freedom. if you might have 1 million followers on Instagram, they can take it away from you, right? Or they charge you to use it, right? And so that means that we don't have freedom over it, and we can't actually pass it on to someone else. They completely control everything around you. So that means that actually you don't have a free market. You don't have freedom, and actually you don't have the ability to sort of create new markets out of that. So now take that from what we saw in the effect of the physical world and into the digital world. What that means is that all the same benefits of when you went from a non-property rights to property rights world in the digital world will see the same effect. Because I own something, it could be like an NFT, I could sell it for maybe a higher price. There is a market, and that's how wealth creation comes from. Like the fact that you have property rights in South Korea, 40 years ago, right? And now you have a house, and you can sell the house to someone else, is actually the basis of much of the wealth that was generated, in places like Seoul. If you can't own a house, you can never generate wealth from that, right? So it's the same idea, but now across everything. And in the digital world, this is why we think it's so important. In the digital world, we spend more time online. We are more, with the digital world, like with data, for instance, is actually even more important. And is actually the most valuable asset. Therefore, we have to have ownership over it. If we don't, who owns our data today? The platform. Who makes all the money? The platform. We should be making that.
And how is Mochaverse helping to protect the ownership that Mochaverse think the most important?